So today's topic is we're in the out of position series. This is the coaching number 2, and we're going to be talking about facing a cold caller in position. My first question I want to ask you guys is, any of you guys actually watch one of the videos I did on facing a cold caller in position? I don't remember when it was. I think it was like 4 or 5 months ago or something like that. Anybody in the chat that looked at it? Okay, cool. So, the information here, I'm going to go a bit deeper and all, but the information will be somewhat similar. We're going to take a look, talk about situations, talk about how we should be approaching it, take a look at some sins and all that type of stuff. But again, it's not going to be the same, but it's like there's going to be some information here that's going to be similar. So, of course, we're going to try to dig a bit deeper and all. All right, so let's start things off. 1 second. All right, so today's goals of the coaching, we're going to try to take a deeper look into situations where we are facing a cold caller in position. So the main goal for today is to understand how to approach flop and turns when being out of position. So we're going to first off take a look at talk about some general concepts, what to look for and all that type of stuff. And then I won't be spending too much time into going deeper into PIO sims and all that, but we're just going to take a quick look at how we should be approaching. There are some interesting things. There are some other things that are a bit more straightforward and all. We're going to try to take a look at everything today. So understanding how different cold calling ranges might change our strategies on the flop. So what are we going to cover today? The situation will be under the gun opens and button cold calls. So it's always going to be that. Those sims, they take quite a bit of resources because ranges are wide. And also when you run it, you're out of position. So, just being out of position and having the ability to bet, just makes the tree very, very big. So, it takes quite a bit of time, especially as the ranges get wider to run these sims. So I think I ran these like a year ago or something like that. But they're still very useful to just to see some general trends, some general concepts and all that type of stuff. So we will be giving different cold calling ranges for button. So I ran three different scripts, basically one with, we will always have the same range. So we will always be opening under the gun. And then I gave a button cold call, which is a bit closer to GTO. And then I did another one where we're facing a recreational. So I gave him a wider cold calling range. And then the third one, what I did is that I did a very wide range. So a very, very against a very loose player, and see how that might affect our strategy from one cold call range to the other and to the other, etc. So we're going to take a look into the 3 cold calling ranges. So we're going to see how flop strategy differentiates versus the different cold calling ranges, how we should be approaching and all. We will also take a look into heads up situations. So when only the button cold calls. And once we're going to be done with that, we're also going to be talking a bit about when we get to the flop 3-way. So basically when somebody cold calls in position and then the big blind comes along, and we're going to be talking about how we should be approaching the flop strategies, what we need to do differently and all that type of stuff. So we're going to try to see general guidelines, as this spot is not easy to approach and we can't play perfect. So, we have to understand that those multi-way spots or those cold call, they're not easy to play. Just because, whenever we are out of position, we are kind of into a disadvantage, if you want to put it this way. So, and also as we're going to see, even though those ranges doesn't contain all the very, very best hands, like aces and kings, when people cold call, you could see that a GTO cold calling range has a lot of equity against our range, even though he doesn't have all the really strong hands. The fact that, he cold calls, I don't know, a 4, 5, 6% range, and we open from under the gun, 19% or 17 to 19% or something like that, I mean, it just gives them quite a bit of equity against our range. So my first question is to you guys. I want to ask how many people here are actually not comfortable playing against a cold caller. So meaning that like they have difficulty, you know, they don't really know how to approach these spots. They're kind of lost when it's actually getting to the flop and all that type of stuff. Okay. Never really comfortable playing out of position. Yeah, playing out of position really sucks. All right, so there's many of you guys that doesn't really feel comfortable. So basically, I think the checking part, all right. Probably missing a lot of check raise though. Okay, one of the most difficult, more difficult situations. I do agree. I'm really lost in these spots. Yeah, I mean, this is like one like, not really sure how to pronounce your name, Hemant, but this is like one of the trouble with, I mean, like when you're facing a cold caller, like is that the problem with this is that it's hard to put them on a range, right? Like, I mean, like when you see somebody cold calling from the cutoff, he's most likely to be a recreational. So, so what happens is that like they're playing very like non-standard strategies. So, I mean, it's really hard to put them into, like to put them on a range, right? Because I mean, like I've seen like some people like yesterday were calling 4-bets like with 8-6 offsuit, you know, like it's like some people just like they decide this hand I want to play it and they're just never folding and all that type of stuff. So it's really hard to put them on a range. So we're trying to make our strategy simple, just make some general rules, general guidelines, and all that type of stuff. Hard to know what range this villain calls. Also, yes, exactly. That's what I just said. Hard to put. Yes. I seem to check my flop range a lot. I mean, it's a fine strategy, but we're going to take a look. Like we're going to like, this is definitely something that I was doing too much and we're going to talk about it later. So it's in my slide, so we won't forget about it, Caesar. Even MMA says he's not super comfortable with that spot. Yeah, I mean, of course, like, I mean, it's one of the hard, like, just being out of position. It's one of the spots that is hard first, and also like not being able to like really put the villain on a range is quite difficult and all that type of stuff. So I mean, yeah, I mean, it like even like crushers like MMA like still has like spots that they don't feel great about it, and it makes us realize that okay, us that are playing lower, you know, like it's just normal that we still have a lot of stuff to actually work on. What should our overall flop C bet out of position and single raise spot be? I mean, it really depends, you know, like when you're blind versus blind, and you're in the small blind, it should be like, I would say between 30 and 40%, you know, like if the player is better, we want to see bet a bit less. If the player is overfolding, we can see bet a bit more. But in general, like I would say in the low to mid 30s when we are blind versus blind. Now, when we are multi-way, it's really hard to say because I mean, like solving for a multi-way spot is much harder and all that type of stuff. So it's really hard to say. This is why like this is one of the spots that is pretty hard because like when you get to the flop, let's say button cold calls and the big blind gets tags along. I mean, like it's really hard to say, okay, what exactly would be the perfect strategy there. Edwin, we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about that right now. But since everyone here seems to have trouble to play against it, the thing is that like you should mostly you should mostly be three betting your hands. You know, like you want to like it needs to be worth it. But anyway, we're going to get into that like in the next few slides. So if you have more questions, let's just ask me then. All right, so let's start here. So as far as BTS, we don't advocate using a cold calling strategy at micro or low stakes just because the rake is simply too high. At higher stakes, where the rake is usually lower, having a cold calling range on the button can start to make sense. Cold calling in other positions is not recommended. There's, like if you want to cold call like in cutoff or middle position, it's really like unique situations. And I think I'm going to be talking about that a bit later too. So when does it make sense to actually cold call at micros or low stakes? How would you guys approach this? I kind of like, before talking about it, I kind of like asking you guys what you think and how would you guys approach it to get kind of a feel of how would you approach these type of situations. So do you guys never cold call? Do you cold call sometimes? Like, what do you look for when you have a situation that you could potentially be cold calling? So from the button, when there's a fish on the blinds. Okay, weak players behind, mostly depends on opening size and who is in the blind, yes. Only when there's a fish, when a fish in the blinds. Only on the button with a whale in the blinds, I like it, Caesar. Big rec, I like it, CG, on the big blind and cold call. Small RFI size, fish in the blinds, less chance of getting squeezed. If blinds are in spots that I'm raising, okay, I cold call someone I have position on fish and has a fish on big blind. No rake matters, but I try to play like I'm at 200 plus since eventually I will be. I like the thought process. Okay. I just want to go back. I think Evan asked a pretty good question here. So what about cold calling behind another cold caller? Let's say MP opens, cut off cold calls, and you're in the small blind with deuces through sixes or 3 deuce to 8-7 suited. Those are some type of situation where I don't mind cold calling, but I don't want to be cold calling too wide. Also, the cutoff needs to be like a pretty decent recreational. Like if he's like a really like weak tight, that he's just like looking to flop a set and then he's just not putting in money in, then like I'm just not bothered by it. But like if he's a pretty big recreational, and like he doesn't, like if he flops top pair, he's not folding, then I don't mind starting to have a cold calling range. But we have to be careful what type of hands we want to be cold calling. Like I would cold call probably some like suited ace-x, some middling pocket pairs like 4s through 7s at like, the threshold where I don't want to be squeezing basically. But like calling hands like 5-6 suited, you're multi-way out of position. It just sucks because like whenever all the money is going to go in, like you're always going to be behind, except you have like the nut straight or something. But like when you make a flush or something like that, you're always going to be dominated. So you would rather have like hands that can make the nuts basically. So like some like ace-x suited that you don't want to squeeze or something like that. But again, the cutoff needs to be worth it first. And then I would not call like hands like 4-5 suited or 7-6 suited, that type of stuff. Of course, if you are in the big blind, I would, but like in the small blind, I would not. Okay, let me just go through the rest of the messages and then we can continue. But I do look at squeeze stats from villains behind. Okay. So Peter says, I don't cold call unless I have very good reasons to. If big blind is well, small blind is passive free, and open razor is fish, I cold call hands with good implied lot that is too weak to 3-bet. Yes, that makes sense. All right, so let's continue, guys. So when does it make sense to cold call at micros? When rec is, so when there's a recreational in the big blind. The thing that's really important here is that the recreational needs to be worth it. I mean, like if he's playing 2012, it's not even worth it, because like he's just so passive. He's not going to be putting in money with second or top. Like it's not like he's just going to stack off with top pair, that type of stuff. Also, if he has a broken stack, like if he has 50 bigs, I mean, even if you hit a set of sixes, right? Like, I mean, you're not going to get an entire stack. So like it sucks. So make sure that, I mean, he has like a full stack, or like, I don't know, like 80, 90 bigs or something. Like if he has like 50 bigs, I mean, it starts to get pretty dicey. And also make sure that you take a look at the quality of the recreational, because if he's like loose passive, and he's not willing to put money into the pot and you haven't seen anything crazy, I wouldn't make huge switch in my strategies, and I would just stick with a 3-bet or fold. So make sure that the recreational is worth it, because I think that's super important. So we talked briefly about cold calling in other positions than the button. The only time I would do that is when there is a ultra aggro recreational in the blinds or behind. So like this exact situation happened to me yesterday. I mean, you get these type of like really aggressive recreational on GG and stuff on the regular tables. I mean, iFloat could confirm what I'm saying, but like there are some situations where people are just like 3-bet calling 4-bets with like stuff like 8-6 offsuit, like I just mentioned previously, and stuff like that. So against these guys, when you are like in middle position and under the gun opens, like it starts to make sense to actually have like a cold calling range, because like he's 3-betting like 40% of the time and stuff like that. And cold calling in this situation makes a whole lot of sense. But like this would be definitely like one of the few like instances where I would actually have like a cold calling range there, and the guy needs to be pretty crazy. And it usually happens on regular tables, because if you are playing Zoom, generally the recreational are much tighter, so they're not like, it's rare that you see like people just like open jamming like 80 bigs on Zoom. I mean, you see that once in a while, but I mean, you see that quite a bit on regular tables. I mean, like I see that pretty much every week and stuff, like some weird stuff like that. So like the type of recreational is super important, and against really aggressive guy, like super aggro guys, like starting to cold call like in cutoff or middle position can definitely start to make a whole lot of sense. Let's continue. So the next slide here is about understanding the cold caller. So usually when somebody cold calls, it means that they are a recreational. It's usually also means that they have a hand that is a bit too good to fold, but not strong enough to 3-bet. So a medium strength hand. This is also why like it's not like it's not a really cool, like nice thing to actually be cold calling, because when you do cold call, like your hand is basically super face up, like to a medium strength hand, whether it's like medium pocket pairs, Broadway, suited connectors, maybe some like ace-x type of hand, but I mean, you basically kind of remove all the really strong hands in your range. So when you're actually facing a cold call from cutoff, middle position, or small blind, I mean, it almost always means that you are facing a recreational player. So I was missing a and a L here. But yeah, so like once you see like a cutoff cold call, middle position cold call, or you open like from the middle position and small blind cold calls, I mean, it's always going to be a recreational. When we are facing a button cold call, so let's say we open middle position or under the gun and button opened and button cold calls, what I kind of like to do is try to get a quick look of who's in the blinds, so like take a look into like, if you see that there's two regulars on like the small blind and the big blind, I mean, now is cold calling strategy doesn't really make sense, but when, let's say, you take a look at the big blind and there's a really big whale, or like a really big recreational, I mean, then it definitely makes sense to actually be cold calling, right? Because I mean, that's what you would do as well, since you want to keep the big blind in the pot. But when you see, like, you take a look at there's two regulars and you're like, okay, like, why is he cold calling here? It's probably is that he's going to be on the weaker side, or is going to be a bit of a recreational. All right. I've seen some regs cold calling on the button NL50. I mean, yeah, I would just not do it. The thing is that, like, again, like, it would make sense if there's a big recreational in the big blind, right? But like, when you take a look into the small blind or the big blind, it's just, and then they're both regulars, and it just doesn't make any sense, because like, when the rake is really high, I mean, it's like, you don't want to see, you just don't want to be called. You would rather just 3-bet and pick up the pot right now. Okay. So post-flop stats also matter, but what is a good sample to make on? I mean, it's hard to say exactly, but I mean, like, post-flop stats, the folding versus c-bet, the c-betting, like, all that type of stuff. Like, you need to have a sample, like, I would say like 1 or 2K hands or something. I'm not really sure, to be honest, but I mean, it's not spots where you can just have like 200 hands and say, okay, he check raises that amount, he folds to versus c-bet that amount, because it's just few like instances that's going to happen. Daniel, and which type of hand would cold call jacks plus? You mean in what type of situations? Yeah, I'm not really sure. Just write it down, and then if we play with those weak regs that have cold calling ranges in a high reg environment, don't they also they are making us play? I mean, it kind of sucks, because I mean, yes, we're gonna have to pay reg, we're gonna be out of position, but again, like, their range is pretty face up. If we know how to navigate against these, I mean, we're still gonna be doing fine. But yeah, I mean, it definitely does suck. Even if open razor is 4-betting like 30% and folding to 3-bet like 25, still better 3-bet or fold. The thing is that I would not start calling because he's really aggressive. So like when you see that, you want to play like fire with fire, like you want to combat fire with fire, so you don't want to be like, oh, he 4-bets like crazy, doesn't fold to 3-bets, so I'm just going to start calling some hands. Basically what you need to do is that you work, like, since he's very aggressive, right, we're just going to be 3-betting a bit less, and then what I would do is I would like widen my 3-bet 5-bet range quite a bit, and then start 3-bet jamming like pocket pairs and like ace queen, that type of stuff. Yeah, it's mostly like, I mean, we're gonna see like a GTO cold calling range, but looks like, but like, I would flat like hands that are a bit too good to fold and not good enough to 3-bet. So like hands like 6s through 9s, that type of stuff, 8-7 suited that you want to bring the big blind along. The thing is that, like, when you have jacks, it really depends. Like, if he's really aggressive, I wouldn't mind just flatting jacks to let him like squeeze when he's like super aggressive. But like, if he's not, I would just start the 3-bet. You can also cold call the 3-bet out of position, which the recreationals do quite often. Min raises are a lot more common a lot more mainstream nowadays. How much that changes your cold calling range from button when there are rakes in the blinds? That's a really good question. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I know that when we are in the big blind and we are facing a min raise from the button, we have to defend really wide. Like we still have to defend like hands like 5-3 also, that type of stuff. So we have to defend super wide against like a min bet. Then I'm not sure when the rake is high, how facing a min raise on the button would affect if we want to be cold calling or not. I'm not sure. I think that if you are, let's say, in a 500 zoom rake where you should have a cold calling range on the button, then if you would be facing like against a 2.5, you should be having a cold calling range on the button. So if you would be facing a min raise, that would potentially assume that if we are on the button, we need to be defending a bit more by also calling a bit wider. But I'm not sure how that impacts, to be honest, like at 50 or lower or micro, that type of stuff. I would just like stick with my standard strategy and not try to make changes like that without really knowing what I'm doing. All right, so let's continue. So now let's take a look into the different cold calling ranges that I gave, and also we're gonna take a look into some reports because I think it's a bit easier to get an overall idea. I mean, I don't want to be trying to dissect every board individually, but we're trying to take a look into like an overall strategy and all that. So let's take a look first at the different cold calling ranges I gave, and then let's take a look into the reports to get an overall view or overall idea of everything. All right. So, okay, so let me just show you the ranges. So the GTO cold call, what I gave is I gave out of position a 19% opening range. I would run these sims today, I would probably give it a slightly tighter opening range with less like of these. And then a bit less of like the suited stuff, and then maybe a bit less of pocket fives, but I don't think it's going to change a whole lot between like 19 or 17. Maybe if you put in like a 13% opening range, then it would change. But again, like I said, like I ran that a while ago. I'm not even sure why, when I did that, but again, they take a lot of resources. So, I mean, they're still very useful. And then as far as the cold calling range, this is what I gave as far like that looks kind of a bit like a GTO cold calling range. So I mean, it's going to be a mix of like pocket pairs, so middling pocket pairs, suited connectors, some suited broadways, offsuit, like those strong offsuit broadways. I think something like that looks pretty solid. The thing is that like if you take a look at the cold calling range here, it's only 5%, right? And we are opening a 19% range. So even though this guy or this player doesn't have like the queens, kings, aces, ace king, ace queen suited, doesn't have all the jacks there, like his range is still quite strong and still has quite a bit of equity against our range. Now let's take a look into the second cold calling range that I gave. So I gave him a 11% cold calling range. So this is definitely a recurrential. So I gave him more pocket pairs, right? More suited connectors, suited broadways, more suited ace-x, offsuit broadways, that type of stuff. Again, like it's really hard to like put a recurrential exactly on a cold calling range. So, I mean, I gave this type of range because I also wanted to make the ranges quite different. You know, I didn't want to make like a 4.5% range and then a 7% range, you know, then like or a 6% range. I really wanted to make like a big difference between the different ranges to see how the strategy would shift between those different cold calling range. So this is somewhat of a like 11% cold calling range. What do you guys think about this type of range, for example, for cold calling for recreational? Would you guys agree? Would you guys be yeah, again, like, I mean, there's no, like, we cannot be perfect here. We cannot be perfect. So we're trying to make like good assumptions. I think like one of the cool thing to do is just try to make like the ranges different. So like, you know how to approach versus different type of cold calling range. Because I mean, if we put like a 4.5%, a 5.5%, and a 7%, I mean, it's not like the strategy for out of position should not be much different, you know, but like from a 4.5 to 11, and then the other ones we can see. I think some will mix the broad ways between 3-bet and call. Yeah, I do agree. Yeah, I think Queen Jack off is always in there. Yeah, could potentially be. Again, like this is, again, it's really hard to be perfect. Yeah, I do agree with Peter. You should probably have less ace queen here and a bit more king queen. Do agree with that. Yeah, I mean those reg dudes can have everything. Yeah. You can also see some more suited connectors. Yeah, I mean I did a third one where I mean we're gonna be a bit wider than this still. So this is the second one, right? And then let's take a look into the third one. So I gave a very wide range. So about a 20%. So he's definitely like a recreational here. So like these are the type of guys where, you know, like I gave like 3/4 of pretty much everything, you know, maybe like I could have gave like hands like I didn't want to go crazy like against a giant whale or something like that. But like this is definitely a fun player that wants to see flops and stuff like that. So yeah, this is about like 263 combos, about 20% of the about the 20% range. So now what I want to do is just take a quick look at how, like I run some scripts for the three different cold calling ranges, and let's take a look into the reports that that I created. Think in my games mostly play against the GTO. Think in my games mostly play against the GTO chart cold calling range. Or this one? I'm not sure I understand what you're trying to say, CG. All right, so on the left here, this is a just 1 second. So I mean, our people are tight and using like a chart, or they're just random range. So yeah, so okay, you would face like a GTO cold calling range or a 20% range, right? Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I just wanted also to put like a couple different options so that we see kind of the bit like the differences and all. So yeah, so like on the left here, this is the GTO cold calling range. In the middle, this is the 11.5 cold calling range. And then here, it's the 20% cold calling range. So we have like a big bet here, bet 41. This is like the big bet, small bet, and the checking frequency. We have on the left here all the boards. The boards might differ. Like there's like in these two scripts, there are like 4 or 5 less boards. I'm not sure why, but again, like we get the same idea with everything. So the first thing I want to look at is this. If we take a look at the GTO on the left here, we see that the main idea, okay, like we have to be checking a lot. Like overall across all these boards, right? I mean, I only did like a 50, like a 49 or 50 like board, because again, like these sims take a long time when you run like couple sizings out of position. Like it's not like it takes quite a bit of time. So I mean, I didn't run like also when I did run this, I didn't have a server. So I mean, it's it's it was taking me a long time. Hey Jimmy, if you want to back your Pio to super instead of combos, click at tools, config, and look at the image. Yeah, I'll definitely write it down and then take a look. Okay, thank you, you. So you sent that to me. Sorry, I didn't see it. But yeah, okay. So on the left here, as we see overall, we need to be checking a lot. So like overall, it's checking 70% across all boards, betting small 15 and betting big 14%, which I mean, like it's quite a lot, right? So I mean, one cool thing is that it kind of makes our life easy, because we just have to check quite a bit. Yes, this is all like under the gun button. So this like is under the assumption where we always open the same under the gun range, right? But we are facing different button cold calling range. Like the ranges I just showed, right? We have the GTO one, the 11.5%, which was a wider one, and then the 20% one, which was really wide. So we have the like under the gun versus button GTO here, under the gun versus button 11.5, and under the gun versus button 20% range. So we see that overall, like the main idea is basically that we have to check quite a bit. If we take a look at the few boards that we don't really, I mean, we kind of have a C betting range. I mean, it's a board like 4-3 deuce. And if you take a look at the range, it's just because villain doesn't like in the GTO calling range, he doesn't really have those 4s, 3s, and deuces. So like if we take a look again at like the GTO calling range, like he calls like 5s a bit, but not really 4, 3s, and deuces. So this is really important because his range is tight. So when he does have all the sets, that's a pretty big part of his range. So we see that there's like a clear distinction. But like whenever the board is like mid and connects very well with his sets, I mean, we're just checking like 100%. So like the only boards I would try to c-bet a bit against like a GTO-ish opponent, if you want to put it this way, is like on the very low boards, like those like 4-4 deuce boards, that type of stuff, it's fine. And then like the higher like king eye boards, because even the ace X board, I mean, like we still have to check quite a bit, because he's gonna have like some ace queen, some ace jack, some ace X suited in his range. And again, like his range is really tight, so it's not like he has a very wide range and a small portion of his range is like going to be top pair or strong hands. Like he has like a 4.5% range, which is really tight compared to ours. So we have to be more careful. So the only boards that we can potentially like c-bet more are like the blanker boards, the lower blank boards, and then some like king high dry boards like king 6-3. Like we can still start having a c-betting range. Like even boards like king 7-6, like whenever like now the cards are relevant towards is like sets, 2 pairs, quality draws and stuff like that, we see that it's now shifting to like just checking basically range. So who's like right now in the chat is just checking range all the time in these situations? Thank you, Andre. Appreciate it. Almost always. I check a lot, me mostly. Only bet bluff versus fish. I'm betting too much out of position. Lol. Yeah, I mean, we can still have a C betting range. But again, like when you're playing 50 NL, like do you really think that you're going to be facing a like a cold caller that's playing GTO? Like GTO would not have a cold calling range basically. Almost always. Checking range most boards. Yeah, this is definitely something I was doing before. Not full range, but a very, very high amount. Yeah, I mean, in general, like in these spots where we are checking like 80, 85%, just check your entire range. I mean, like if you were to like see a solve that you c-bet 85%, you would just c-bet your entire range. I mean, it's basically the same thing here. Just having like a 10% betting range, I mean, it's just not gonna have that much EV, and it's gonna make your strategy a lot more complicated because you're gonna have to balance like a checking range, a betting range, and then on the turn and all that type of stuff. Bet on low paired boards, yes, totally. Yeah, John. I mean, like in this, I agree with you, right? It really depends on the. It really depends on the cold calling range. You know, like if I included the sets, of course, then we would be checking like pretty. Like if he had all the fours, the threes, and the deuces, where we open them like at 50% frequency from under the gun. Then we would definitely be checking range here. Like we would be checking range like on 9-8 deuce, for example. But the thing is that like against a GTO, like we can see that here, you know, like the 4-3 deuce here, like against a wider range where we are facing a 11.5% cold calling range where he has all the small pocket pairs. Now we are checking 86%. So so I do agree, but the thing is that like if he doesn't have the sets, right, then we can be a bit more aggressive. This is just like the main takeaway here. Like if you approach a certain situation and you see like 4-3 deuce, he cold called, I think he has all the sets, then just check your range. Okay, just 1 second. But I think the 4-3 deuce is a good example to see like, okay, when he doesn't have all the sets, we can be a bit more aggressive. Yeah, it does make sense. Some flats super wide on those blank boards and low boards in which we have to c-bet. Should we use a more bigger c-bet or a 30% bet? In general, like this is some general rule of thumb that I personally use. When we are out of position, I kind of like keeping the pot small. So I kind of like betting small when I do want to have a betting range. It will change if I'm facing like a big recreational and all that. You know, I'm going to be playing my hand a bit more face up and all that. But in general, if I do want to c-bet and I'm out of position, I do like having a smaller size c-bet. I spoke a guy who is a member of a not to mention coaching site. He was advised to check range on flops where villain can have 2 sets or more. What do you think? I mean, we see clearly that when villain has the sets in his range, we just have to like check a bit. Like we have to check quite a bit. The thing is that like it's also like important because like when you face a cold call, you know, like you have like a 20%, right? Like a, I don't know, 17 to 19% opening range, right? But when he cold calls 5% or 7%, I mean, his range is much like, even though he doesn't have, like I always repeat that, even though he doesn't have all the strong hands in his range, like aces, kings, queens, whatever. I mean, his range is still strong. And I mean, his range is still strong and has quite a bit of equity. It's a bit like, guys, like I just want to read the comments and then okay, I'm just gonna write it down 1 second. Forgot what I wanted to say. Yeah, I did forget what I wanted to say, but it's not important. Interesting thing is that the big bet remains at similar overall frequency versus the different ranges. Yes, it does. But the small bet is the one that increases the wider villain cold calls range. I mean, yeah, the thing is that like a lot of the hands like wants to get protection, wants to bet for thin value, that type of stuff, wants to deny equity. Also, the fact that we are out of position, I mean, it generally means that we want to be betting on the smaller side. How would you decide Rex range without a HUD on GG, for example? So this is a really cool question, Daniel. I mean, when you don't have a HUD, you have to pay attention to showdowns. Like, this is super important. Like, I might make huge adjustments because, as an example, yesterday I was playing a game. I was playing 1K, and I just sat down. And I had no info on one guy, but like I just saw that he cold called, cut off with 8-6 offsuit, and then called a 3-bet, and then called it like a big squeeze in position. And then the hand got to showdown. So after seeing that hand, I have to make quite big adjustments right now, because otherwise, I mean, like, he's just going to be donating his money like to the next guy if I don't make adjustments. So like seeing that showdown where the hand is really a hand that tells you, okay, this guy is really bad. So let's say he cold calls like 5s, right? And then calls a 3-bet, and then gets to showdown. I mean, does it really say anything about him unless like other than the fact that he's a recreational? Yes, okay, he should not cold call and then should not call the 3-bet. But like, as far as being a recreational, it does make sense. He has a pocket pair, wants to hit a set or whatever. So it doesn't really tell you like how bad of a player he actually is. But when you see a guy like cold calling 8-6 offsuit, then calling a 3-bet in position, then you are for sure knowing he's like a pretty big fish, right? So you have to make significant adjustments without stats, of course. Basically, button GTO call range doesn't have much air. No, I mean, it's all strong hands. I mean, it's like suited stuff, broadways, and then pocket pairs. What do you mean? Like for whatever it's worth, what kind of adjustments are you making in that situation? What situation? X6. Then I'm going to start having a calling range, right? I'm going to also try to 4-bet him light. I'm going to try to ISO him. Like, for example, like one of the adjustments I made is basically I cold call, like, just a quick example as of yesterday. He had a huge stack. He had like a 5K stack. So one of the things that I did was under the gun open, I had pocket 7s on the button. I cold call, and he was in the big line. And he actually squeezed to like 13 bigs. And then the under the gun folded, and then I just jammed on him, and he called king 10 off. And then against these guys, I definitely want to be running it once, especially when he has a big stack. So he ended up having like king 10 off, and I ran it once. And the reason why I only did run it once is that he has a big stack. So I'm willing to take the variance to double my stack, so that in the potential future, I have 200 bigs and I can win a more sizable pot. So, I mean, this is just one of the examples, Okay, so what are the rules of c-betting here? Okay, let's continue here. So, I mean, we have to be, we took a look at the GTO cold calling range. If we take a look at the middling one, like 11.5, I mean, it's quite a bit the same. We have to be checking around 60% of the time. I mean, the general takeaway, we're going to be doing a small recap afterwards in the PowerPoints. But the main takeaway is that we have to be checking quite a bit. Even against like a 11.5, whenever the board is like mid, like 8-6, like 6-5-4, like those middling boards are really bad for us. They're really bad for us when like we're facing a GTO. When we're facing like a recreational, we can still have like on those higher boards have a betting range. So like on the king high boards, we can definitely still have a betting range. On the ace high board, it's kind of like, since you can have more ace x, like even on a board like ace jack 6, I mean, we're still checking like 70%. On the board like ace 5 3, we're checking 80%. Ace 6 deuce, I mean, this is monotone, we're checking 86%. So like ace high boards are not truly that good. They start to become a bit better, against the very wide, like recreational, for example. But again, like it's kind of like the main idea is that we have to check quite a bit. We can still see bet on like those king high boards. We can also see bet a bit more on the mid high board. So like king 8-7, queen 8-7. Whereas if we had those same boards, so like those king 8, and then we were checking like 76 and 96% of the time. Do you use default against unknowns with full stack? I mean, the thing is that if I have stats on the guy and he's playing loose, then I would probably try to see bet a bit more on the higher dry boards, like the king high dry boards, queen high dry boards, those deuce 4 board where like nobody ever hits anything. I would still see bet there. But in general, like when the board is like mid connected, I mean, I'm just checking quite a bit. Also, we're going to be taking a look into a couple situations later, see like when is good to be betting, when it's good to be checking more, like when to have a betting range if your default strategy is to check range and all that type of stuff. We see now here that like on the right against the 20% cold call range, we see that now there's quite like a substantial difference between, I mean, the GTO and the 20% cold calling range. We see that the higher boards, like we can start c-betting a lot more aggressively, like king 7-6, king queen 5, king 6-3, queen 6 deuce type of stuff. Even the board like 7-6 deuce is not as bad. I mean, it was really bad against the GTO one, but against here it's really good. We can still go ahead and c-bet. It's just a matter of like understanding like the type of cold caller you are facing. The wider he is, the more we can see bet. The common denominator here is that when the board is connected and a flush draw, we still get to check quite a bit on against anybody, right? But whenever like he starts to call like wider and wider, we can start c-betting more and more. And generally those are the higher dry boards. So like, and then the boards where nobody hit anything. So like those 4-4 deuce board, those king 6-3 board, those are the type of boards we are looking to be c-betting. And when we do bet, just betting small is totally fine. I mean, yes, I could see from largest to smallest. And then once we're done with that, we're going to go back to the PowerPoint. So we see that, like, I mean, it's those king high boards that are generally getting bet a bit more here on the right. Those drier by check frequency. Yeah, I can do that. So, I mean, it's usually like those middling boards, very connected board. We see like the 10-9-8, 10-9-8, ace 10-9 type of stuff. Like those connected board, even those ace high boards are getting checked like quite a bit. So like these are like all stuff that even like blind versus blind, this is common stuff, like 6-5-4, we just check range and all that type of stuff. It's 33 and like 70. So 30 or 70, the sizings. Since we have to check so much, would you check sets and top kicker, really strong hands? I mean, like in these spots where let's say we are checking 87%, I would just check my entire range there. Because like there's no, like again, like, I mean, if you're playing against a really big recreational, then of course we can still have like some betting range, of course, but then I would take a look into the recreational, right? Like if he's playing 30-12, then I mean, like obviously we want to be betting ourselves, but he's re-aggro, potting and stuff, does a lot of like stabbing, then just checking range is fine. Another good thing to do is add a row at the bottom for averages of each. Yeah, I mean, they're there when like in the first ones. Now I filtered it, but like you could see here, like these are the averages for everything without the board. So this is the overall average, but it was down. Now that I filtered it, it's not there anymore. So yeah, anybody has questions about this? I mean, again, like it's hard to get a really perfect plan here, but in general, the plan is to check a lot, right? And then the boards that we can still see bet are the like king high dry boards, and then those queen high dry boards, and then the nothing boards. Even the ace high board, we do have to do quite a bit of checking. And then as the ranges gets wider and wider for cold calling, we can bet more and more. So the main takeaways here, overall low betting frequency, almost always true when out of position. The wider the cold caller range gets, the more we can start c-betting. The middling boards that are pretty much always bad for PFR versus all the different cold calling ranges. So in those high checking spots, using a check range strategy is totally fine. We can still have a betting range against the tighter cold calling ranges. And it's mainly on the higher disconnected board. So mainly king high, even the ace high, it's mostly getting a check. Yeah, so this is what I just said. So now checking range. Let's take a look into how to approach flop or turn. I mean, I don't want to be going like in really big, in-depth into those sims, but I mean, it's always good to just take a quick look into it. I mean, we're going to be doing that right now. We're going to be taking a quick look into like one or two sims. I also want to be talking about like multi-way stuff and other stuff as well. So we'll be taking a look into a few sims against a GTO cold calling range on different textures. We will try to see how to approach versus different lines, flop, check raise, and check call, delete, c-bet, different turns, that type of stuff. All right. So the first situation I did is 7-6 deuce flush draw against a GTO cold call. And we check range. If we take a look at the report, it was checking like 90x%. Let me just check. No, this is not the one. This is the one. 7-6 deuce. It was checking 96%. So I mean, like we're not gonna like. I mean, we're not gonna try to create like a 4% betting range here. We're just gonna be checking our entire range. Then I ran this first sim with two sizings on the flop, so a small one and then a big one for in position, and it was always betting small. And then also the check raising sizes I ran. So these are the type of sizing that gets used by each positions. So once we check here, here our entire range, villain should be betting around 60% of the time. I mean, that's one of the things, right? Like we need to be checking quite a bit because the board is really good for him and his range is quite strong. So if we take a look at the equity, how much equity do you think villain has against our range? And keep thinking about like, we have a 20% range, close to 20%, and he has a 4.5% range. Can you guys try to guess how much equity he has? All right, so let's take a look. The equity for out of position is 49 points. So almost 50%, which is like, I mean, on this board, I would be interested to see like the range versus range equity, but like, I haven't done it. And yeah, so like even, I can do it real quick, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. The thing is that like he has quite a bit of equity, even if it's like pre-flop against our range, because his range is quite strong. So again, like here, he needs, like he's betting 60% of the time. It does make sense just because like it's a really good board for him. His range is quite strong on that board and overall, against our range. So just betting at a high frequency makes a whole lot of sense. And then as far as against a bet, like I think that, I mean, of course, like Yuri is saying, do you recon position gets their C betting ranges more or less correct? I think people will be stabbing pretty aggressively here for a small size. I think that, yeah, I think they're going to be like betting their one pair type of hand and then stuff like maybe ace queen, more with a spade, or ace jack with a spade. But we see that like ace jack, ace queen gets bet pretty much half the time, king queen off half the time, maybe a bit less like king queen. They bet that type of stuff. But yeah, I mean, or jack 10 off with like, not jack 10 off, but jack 10 suited with a heart. I mean, they're definitely going to be betting flush draws and backdoor flush draw first. I think they might have a bit less like heart type of stuff. You know, like that type of stuff, you know, they might have a bit less of that unless they have a gut shot. But overall, I do think that it's a spot where they're going to be betting pretty aggressively here. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys think people will be betting like really far from this? Or you guys think, I mean, of course, it's not going to be perfect, but like, what are your guys' thoughts on this? People overstab when check to. Some guys love to stab. Yeah, I think it's not a spot where they will be overstabbing as like they need to be betting like 60%. Yeah, offensive bigger sizing, I do agree. I do think that here, I like betting small is fine, just because like once we do bet small, like we really target like the king high from villain, because like if you bet small, let's take a look at the calling range here. Like, I mean, we still need to defend hands like king, queen off, right? Like if we were to bet big, king, jack off, king 10 off type of stuff with a spade. If we were to bet big, it gets really close. And then these ace highs too gets a bit closer and all that type of stuff. Of course, these hands are just like the backdoor flush draw type of stuff. So I don't think like betting small or big will really change anything towards a hand like ace 8 off, but it might be changing. Let me just do something real quick, because I'm interested to see. All right, so sorry about that. I was just curious to see how it does affect the calling range when we are facing a bigger bet size. Pro tip, you can click with the scroll wheel on the taskbar, the icon of the pie window you already have. Oh, really? Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, so basically, like, again, with the small sizing, I kind of like it because, I mean, it's a spot where, just think about it, right? Like, is this a spot where we want to be betting aggressively? I'm just going to open this here. Is this a spot where we want to be betting aggressively? And the answer is yes. I mean, we want to be value betting like pocket fives here against is like king, queen, that type of stuff, or ace, queen, or ace, king. You know, we can still get value from much worse, deny equity and all that type of stuff. So just betting small, I think, makes a whole lot of sense because a big portion of our range actually wants to be betting. We're betting as thin as like fives or even like hands like ace, queen for value here. So yeah, so I think the sizing down is totally fine. Now, once we are facing a bet, I mean, the check raising range here will contain like jacks, tens, queens, hands like nines and eights are not really getting check raise a whole lot. I mean, villain can still have tens, can still have jacks. So it's kind of like not great. Also, it can have all the sets and all that type of stuff. But we see that like sevens and sixes are mostly getting check raise. If we take a look at flush draws, this is quite a common situation. Whereas like if we have the ace high flush draw, right, the ones with the more showdown value actually gets check called always. You know, hands like ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack, we just gonna check call. And then the ones with better backdoors with less showdown value, so a hand like ace 8 or ace 5 will be getting check raise at a much higher frequency. First of all, we have less showdown value. And second of all, we have great backdoor straight draw as well. This is a pretty awkward check raising range. How do you keep try to keep track of your range out there. I mean, it's hard to be like, I mean, we cannot play perfect, all right? So, I mean, hands like jacks, queens, kings, we're going to be mixing in. So I would probably try to check raise like half the time or something like that. And then those 10s, 9s, 8s, I would mostly call, and then maybe check raise sometimes with pocket 10s. But yeah, it's hard to play perfect. I mean, you just have to get like the main ideas or some general guidelines here. Again, like the flush draws, right? Which flush draws do I want to be checking, or which flush draws do I want to be raising? I mean, the ones with more showdown value gets called more. The ones without, those type of stuff. You know, like those really bad, like Jack 9, Queen 9, like those a bit worse. You know, like we can check call. I mean, and then we can just mix those. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but like the trend with the ace high is pretty clear. We can also check raise some one spade combos, that type of stuff. As far as backdoor flush draw, we see again the same kind of thing. It prefers the ones with the better backdoors. So hands like King 9, Queen 9, King 8, suited type of stuff. Jack 9 suited type of stuff with the backdoors is much better. We can see the same trend with the ace X here. The ones with more showdown value is always getting check called, that type of stuff. So yeah, I mean, we cannot play perfect here. There's no clear, like, it's not like it's purely raising all the overpairs. So we try to mix in some check raise. I would probably try to go with like 50-50 or something like that. Would take a look at the player type, that type of stuff to make my decisions. Yeah, I mean, it's strange, but again, like the difference is like 20% or something like that. So like those are the type of spots where it doesn't really make sense to just put time into understanding why. You know, just take a look at like, okay, you could check raise half the time both, and that would be fine. I mean, like, and then pocket deuces, I would pretty much check raise 100%, and then that type of stuff. Once it goes check, this is kind of tricky, right? Because it's one of like the few situations where like it's actually splitting its range between two sizings. Let me just take a look at Peter. Usually in other situations, we check raise the lower overpairs more often and check more with the highest pocket pair. How come we check raise less with the lower overpairs in this situation? I think it's because Villain has more 10s than jacks. So he has 10s and jacks in his range. So now check raising 8s and 9s is is not great because he has like those better overpairs. This is why like the threshold is really like pocket queens. I think like once we saw here, yeah, like pocket queens was a bit more, even jacks. I mean, jacks and queens, but 10s, I mean, is a bit like, and 9s and 8s are never getting check raised. And I think that's because of the fact that he can have 10s, he can have 9s, he can have jacks, that type of stuff. If we would remove those in his range, I would think that now we kind of start check raising a lot more 10s and jacks there. All right, let me just check here. Is this done? Yeah, okay, so this is done. I just want to take a quick look at how we adjust our calling strategy. So what I did is that I inputted a bigger c-bet size for in position. So check, and now he's betting 3/4 spot, like you guys mentioned. That you were facing quite a bit. And again, we're gonna have to fold a lot more here. And then we check raise like on this, like we check min raise here, which is quite funny. But yeah, I mean, like those, again, like this is exactly why I kind of like the small bet, right? Because all those king, queen off, king, jack off, king, 10 off, which is quite a bit of combos, right? He just needs to be folding, you know, like even ace 10 off needs to get folded, ace jack off needs to be folded. And like those hands like would always be getting called. So like if we just see here and compare the two real quick, and then we can go back to the rest. So here bet. So I mean, we have to fold like we have to fold about like half the time more, which is like super significant. So like again, like he needs to call like those king queen off with spade always. Now he needs to fold them. Ace queen off needs to get called purely, and it starts folding. Even starts to fold some ace king off, ace jack off. So basically, by betting big, you kind of make villain's life easy, right? Like the only thing that I would guess he's not gonna do is like check raise very small here. Like, but again, like that's the only thing. But I do think that he's still going to be check raising the hands like sevens and like some hands that wants to be check raising here. So it's not like he's going to make huge mistake. I just think his sizing will be bigger. But again, like he doesn't put any tough hand, like any hands into a tough spot here. So yeah. So now let me just go back here. So once it goes check, check, this is kind of like the tricky part here because like, let's say the turn is a pure blank. It's actually splitting its range between like two sizings, and it's like clear as day that like there's nothing in between, so it's either block or bet big. And it's like, damn, like what do I do now? Potentially we could use just a medium bet. But the problem with that is that like the hands that wants to overbet really wants to overbet because the flop went check, check. So if we have a hand like sixes, or like aces, kings, queens, or an overpair, like once the flop goes check, check, we want to be putting in money into the pot. So like just going medium, I'm not sure it's really the right approach because a big part of our range actually wants to be betting big here. But the other problem is that a big part of our range, not a big part, but like a decent part of our range actually wants to be betting small because it wants to deny equity. So what would you guys say? So let me just try to explain myself. Once villain checks back the flop, okay? So once villain checks back the flop, how would you perceive his range? So like capped, okay, weak, polarized. Overcards, I agree, Raphael. As weak and capped. Just overcard and trying to get to showdown, yes. So basically what I like doing here, right, is that he's mostly gonna have like overcards here. Like if he had tens, I think he's always gonna be betting. So if we check at the betting range, like he should be checking tens, jacks, like half the time. Nines. I think that part of the range when you guys said it would be overstabbing, I think like this is the part of the range that I think he's going to be overstabbing. He's going to be betting more nines, more eights, more tens, more jacks, and a hand like fives I can see definitely getting checked. A hand like not 7-6, but I was looking at 6-5, but yeah, 6-5 doesn't, like in his range, shouldn't really be there. But like I do think that this part of the range will get fast played more. So what happens is that once he checks back, he doesn't have like all those hands to be defending against like a really big bet, because like once he checks back and the turn is a deuce, and then we overbet, I mean, like he has an easy call with like all those overpairs, right? So the problem here, not the problem, but the thing here is that I personally do is that once that happens, I kind of try to play exploitatively. And like before saying it, like how would you guys approach this spot exploitatively if you know that villain is like betting his strong hands a bit too much on the turn? How would you approach turn with like splitting the sizes, and how would you guys do it? Over bluff turn, okay, but what sizing would you guys be using? Small with value hands, bet the smaller size. Bluff for bigger size, smaller with value. Bluff big a lot, size down with value. Size up bets. Jam, yeah, on the turn, yeah, that's a great size. Like 15x jam. No, but the thing is that like I was just asking is how would you like split your range? You know, like the thing is that like once he's checking back, I think he's gonna have bet like a lot more stronger hands than he should on the flop, right? So on the turn, like if I have a set, you know, or I have aces, I mean, I don't want to be overbetting, you know, because I just think that overbetting will generate too much fold, you know, too much fold equity, which is not what I want to do with my value part of the range. So basically what I would try to do is I would try to actually size up with my bluffs and over bluffs in the big size. And then with the small size, I would try to put my value. Then how I would try to do it is that like the hands that needs a bit more protection, so hands like tens, you know, that check the flop and then wants to be overbetting, hands like jacks, those are the type of hands where I would still put in the overbetting range. But if I have a hand like kings, aces, sixes, sevens, I'm just betting small, for example. Like sevens here is overbetting. I would never overbet sevens. I would pretty much never overbet sixes too, just because I think his range is going to be too weak and we're going to be generating too much fold. Yes, exactly. So like Yuri, what's folding is folding no matter the size. So like if you check back 10, jack 10 a heart, it doesn't matter if you bet 1/3 pot or you bet what's folding is folding no matter what the size. What's calling is probably calling versus any size too. Yeah, but you can still like on turn or river, like on river, you can still go with a really big bet then. I mean, the thing is that like when you have like a really strong hands like sixes, I mean, or sevens, those are the type of hands I would never overbet, to be honest. Like it's just like I would just bet like, you know, like we're facing a recreational, so I would probably bet something like 2/3 pot and then just overbet the river. Because I want him to call with ace queen. I want, like, he's supposed to call the overbet with ace queen. I don't think people will do that. So what happens is that I just want him to catch up, and then on the river, that's where I'm going to be polarizing myself more. Do we have a check raise on turn? So delete check raise. I mean, so check, check, check. I mean, he should go small. I mean, the thing is that like the problem with that is that on the flop, he should be betting most of his like strong hands, right? Like he's betting 60% on the flop. So that means that most of his strong hands are getting bet on the flop. So he doesn't have that many like check back flop, delay C bet turn, unless it's like a 5x, like pocket fives type of hand, or like those hands we saw that he's actually checking back. So, I mean, we do check raise a bit, but not that much. Also, I mean, we do bet quite a bit of strong hands once it goes check, check, you know, like we bet about like half the time. So yeah, I don't think it's a really big thing, to be honest. So our size can be protection dependent. So basically, like I always try to advocate like using one size. When we do face cold callers, generally they're recreational. So I don't mind using a couple different size. Also, in most cases, it's pretty clear what type of sizing we should be using. But here, like in these spots where it's probing, not probing, but delay c-betting when the flop goes check, check, there's many situations where it's pretty clear that there's two sizes that are getting used quite often. So those are the type of situations which are a bit harder. All right. So yeah, so basically, again, I don't want to be spending too much time on these, but against check, check on a higher turn, let's say it's a queen, we see that again, like now it's less significant, right? the block betting, and it's like there's a lot of big bet going on. So I think in a case like this, where it's the turn is high, we can just delay c bet with a polarized range, and I think that would be fine. In a spot like it's a deuce, and it's a lower turn card, I mean, it's really clear that like the two sizes are split. I mean, it's one of the hardest spots, what do I have to do? Like, do I have to bet small? Do I have to bet big? On one note, like those hands, like jacks really wants to put money in, that type of stuff. Another spot that I want to take a look at, but I mean, it's pretty straightforward, is ace jack. So like we look at the middling board, but we can take a look also at a higher board. So ace jack 6 flush draw, where we are still checking range, because I mean, we're just checking quite a bit there. 1 second. So once we check now, what type of sizing do you guys think villains should be using on this board? So once we check here, okay. So for those, yeah, since we check, we still have all the good hands. Yes, I agree. But for all those that wrote small size, I would ask this next question. On the 7-6 deuce flush draw, right? It was a spot where the board was very good for button, right? But button was betting at a pretty high frequency, right? He was betting like 60-ish% of the time. He was still betting quite a bit of stuff for value, right? Like for protection and all that type of stuff. On ace jack 6, do you think that he's going to be betting a lot of stuff for value? So like, is he really going for thin value and all that type of stuff? No, so when he's going to be betting, he's going to be a bit more polarized. Yeah, so like he's going to be saying, okay, when I do bet here, I have an ace, right? I'm not going to be value betting sevens here. So that means that the sizing should be small or on the bigger side here then. Yeah, so it should be on the bigger side, basically. So, like, I mean, I could say, like, I only ran this for, like, I mean, I could even see, like, to be honest, like, let me just copy this. 1 second, guys. So I'm just gonna copy here. Paste, and then I'm gonna give him 3 sizing, so 75, 100, and 130. Because I only gave like 30 and 70, but like I could even see like going even a bit bigger. I'm not sure if that's a thing, but like I know blind versus blind, it happens sometimes. But again, the general idea is that, I mean, when he's going to be betting, he's not going to be betting for thin value. He's going to be pretty polarized. So what happens is that you should just be betting on the bigger side. Was thinking small as he has less top of the range, but he still has sixes, jacks, and ace jack. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that when he's betting, he's basically saying, I have a strong ace or better. So like that means that the sizing should be on the bigger side. So again, we see that he's still betting like he's still betting about 40% of the time. Pocket sixes is a pure bet. He's betting ace jack, even hands like ace queen. I mean, ace jack is 2 pair, sorry, but even ace queen is getting mixed. He's going to have a bunch of like medium strength hand that wants to check back, so he needs to be checking back quite a bit. So again, like he's basically saying like ace queen or better when he's betting. That means that I could even see like a bigger bet size be in the mix, to be honest, but we'll see that. I just ran it. And against a bigger bet size, I mean, like we should not really be raising a whole lot. Like we should just be calling mostly. I mean, he's repping a polarized range and all that type of stuff. But once it goes check, check, and we want to delay c-bet turn, when the turn is a flush, I mean, it's like I would just use a smaller sizing, to be honest, like with my entire range. I mean, there are some hands that wants to be over betting. I mean, to be honest, again, like you have to, like if you're playing against a recreational, of course, we want to be using, like I would be using an overbet if I had a hand like King 8 suited, like King 8 of diamonds, I would definitely overbet here. If I have King 9, I'm definitely overbetting, that type of stuff. Of course, if I have sixes, I might be potting or something like that. That, you know, if I had sixes, I want to check raise or something. So if we're playing against a recreational, we can have multiple sides. But like if we're playing against a pretty strong player, I mean, I wouldn't mind just going small, and then I would polarize myself on the river, because most of our range really wants to be betting. And then I try to keep like I try to have like one sizing and not try to complicate things too much. I mean, there are some situations where we need to, but yeah, like I think this is pretty important, and I always advocate that. But yeah, so like on a pure blank, what type of sizing do you think we delay c-bet? Like on a deuce of heart, for example? Yeah, now it's like both sizings as well. Like it's like these are the type of spots where it's quite like, I mean, it's still betting like sixes, fives, fours, threes. Like, I mean, deuces is but like even threes, fours, fives is getting overbet. I mean, like hand like 7-6 is getting overbet as well. But we see that there's a lot of ace-x that wants to get value. There's like, so those are the type of spots where it's really, really hard. Like there are some hands that are clear overbet, right? And then there are some hands that are clear smaller bets. So those are the type of spots where I mean we're betting 60%, and it's very clear that there are some hands that really wants to bet big, some hands wants to be betting small. So this is kind of why like it's like so tricky, these spots, because there's nothing clear. In a lot of situations you see like, oh, it's overbet or check, right? Or it's only betting small or whatever. But like in this situation, it's not really the case. So this is really something that's like a bit on the tougher side. So like as a general rule of thumb, like the weaker ace-x can go in the smaller sizing. And then, I mean, of course, the value range when we are overbetting is quite easy, in the sense that it's going to be like ace king plus, and we have plenty of bluffs to go along with it, with hands like, you know, queen 10, we have like some flush draws, we have gut shots. It's also using hands like 7, 6, 6, 5, so like third pair. Those are type of like nice nice bluffing. The thing is that like if you had sixes or ace-6 suited, you know, like you should probably bet always. So like if we see here, like, yeah, sixes is, so I'm not really sure why it's really betting like 6x a lot, since we're really not blocking like anything, because he shouldn't have ace-6 suited, and if he does, it would probably be betting. But yeah, so like it's kind of hard like in these type of situation, but it's a spot where like on a flush turn, it's like it's a lot easier. But here, I mean, there's still some medium bets, some big bets, some small bets. So I would try to like just pick like a small size, and then just try to approach this spot. You know, like with the small size, we have some medium strength hand like ace-10, and then we polarize ourselves to ace-king or better with the big size, and then we have some bluffs to go along with it. We have hands like sixes and jacks, that type of stuff. Again, like it was not like yes, I think that that's a good point, Pablo. Like we have like against top pair, we have 5 outs against a hand like ace-10, so which makes a lot of sense. I totally agree. No, I think it has to do a bit of the fact that what Pablo just said, because once he checks back, he should be betting all of his sets. So it's not like he's checking back sixes and then he can still have that in his range. Like sixes is discounted from his range because he actually bet that on the flop and the flop went check, check. So I think now the reason is like why Pablo is like what Pablo said is that like having a six, we have pretty much like, we don't do that with Jack X because with Jack X, we have plenty of showdown value against like is sevens through like nines, right? Or sevens through tens. But with pocket sixes, we lose to all the sevens through tens. Plus, we have some like not great equity, but we have a bit more equity than with a hand like pocket sevens, for example. Not always. Do we split our betting range always when we delay c-bet on blank turns just to get some simplification? No, usually, to be honest, when we delay c-bet and the turn is like a blank, like it's usually like a middling size. The problem is that like when we are in position, when we are out of position here, it's because we check range, right? So like we have all the strong stuff in our range. So like in like a 3-bet pot, when we do use mixed strategies and the turn is a blank, usually you only use like a pot size bet on the turn, something like that. And then when there's an overcard, so let's say the flop goes check check and the board is like 8 high, right? And the turn goes check, the flop goes check check, and the turn is an overcard. Those are the type of spots where it's starting to use two sizing, because on one hand, you have like the turn top pair, you know, that you're going to have like that are really strong in your range. Plus you're going to have some traps that wants to bet big. And also you're going to have hands that check the flop that are medium strength hand that just wants to bet for 10 value on the turn, you know? So like it's usually in these type of situation where there's like two sizings. To be honest, the overbets all like they follow some similar concepts to a checker strategy. I mean, the overbets like here is polarized, right? Like, I mean, it's like repping strong ace-X or better, and is going to be using some bluffs. So like in those polarized situations, you see like this approach quite often. It's a bit like what's really hard is like, you know, like the bluffs, like what type of bluffs do we use in the smaller betting range, you know? And we see that it's using like 5s, 4s, 3s. I mean, those are quite nice bets because we target like the 7s through 10s in his range, you know, because when he does bet small, like he needs to still fold like some 7s, which is now great. So yeah, so like those middling hands, usually like how it works is like the middling stuff, you know, like those 8s through 10s are usually always called, always checked. And then those weaker ones are the weaker pocket pairs usually get bet a bit more. Yeah, the low pair makes sense, totally. And then like when we do overbet, like again, like there are common trends, right? Like the hands that wants to overbet, let's say for pocket pairs, are the ones usually with a diamond. So we see that whenever we don't have a diamond, we just bet small. Always with a diamond, we can do a mix, but it's mostly betting big. Same thing with pocket 4, same thing with 5s, that type of stuff. So those are like concepts that are important where if you're like, okay, like, oh my God, it's splitting between both, but we see that like when it has a flush or a blocker, it's usually betting on the bigger side. And then I would assume that once he calls and then the river's like a 8 of diamonds, we turn these hands into a bluff, and we do. So those are nice hands to be turning into a bluff. I mean, we don't block. The thing is that we don't block any relevant, like, not sure why, like we don't block any relevant flushes with this. But yeah, it's hard to find bluffs, and except like something like king queen off. Those are pretty standard and pretty pretty natural, if you want to put it this way. Those king queen off, or I mean, we don't have that many king 10 off in these positions, but yeah. So again, like, I mean, like, I don't want to be spending so much time on this just because of the fact that like it's super complicated. I think we're trying to like make this as simple as possible. We saw some concepts and all. Do you guys have any questions about this before we move to talking about some three-way action? On the turn, like the ones of, yeah, I mean, usually like a good rule of thumb, right? Who as that is Pablo? Yeah. Usually a cool rule of thumb is that the higher the equity you have, like the more you want to put it into the big sizing. So here we see that like hands like king 10 of diamonds, queen 10, queen 9, like the flush draws are mostly getting big bet, right? If you take a look at, let's say, queen 10 a heart, for example, it's using mostly the small size, but also the bigger size. But we see that queen 10 of diamonds, it's mostly the big size and not really the small size. So, so in general, like a good rule of thumb to keep is to keep in mind is that the more equity you have, like the more you want to put it into the betting range or into the bigger size if you do want to be betting. Could you share the three aggregate report? I mean, I'm going to tell, I don't mind sharing them. I'm going to tell support. So once we overbet, you said call, and then the river 8. Yeah, 7-6 is a bet. I mean, not really sure why. I mean, it needs some bluffs. Some of your bluffs actually gets there, right? So some of your bluffs. So also this is like pretty cool concept where like we want to bet small, right? Because I mean, there's still some hands that wants to be value betting a hand like ace jack, that type of stuff. And it's not a spot where we can just jam because villain can still have very, very strong flushes, right? So we can still have strong flushes. And in these type of spots, when we do use a overbet size, we use a big one, but not a massive one. So like if the river like is a, let's say a 4, you guys, I'm not sure if you guys saw, but like if the river is like a 4 of heart, what type of sizing do you think we're going to be using? As the big size, I mean. Yeah, we see like, let's say there's a 4. Now we see that it's betting medium and it's jamming. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that like when like just like, I mean, this is not towards this topic, but like as a general rule of thumb, if you're trying to decide like what type of sizing should I be using on the river, just think about, let's say you have 6s here, like on this river, like 6s is still the nuts, right? So you can definitely use a really, really, really big size, right? But when the river is a flush, villain can have many flushes. Now it's not the same anymore. We can overbet or we can use a big bet, but we use a slightly smaller overbet. And let's say the river is like, I don't know, a 10. Now, again, with a 10, he's going to have hands like Jack 10. He's going to have hands like Ace 10, which completes. So basically, now we can still have, because he shouldn't really have that many King Queens against the overbet. So like King Queen, yeah, he should still call a bit against the overbet, the King Queen off type of stuff. But again, like it's still a more relevant card, right? So we see that there's a lot, like there's more like almost 2x potting here. But if we remove the 10 and put the 9, for example, then the sizing should go into the all-in range. And we see that now it's clearer. We don't overbet to 1.9x, we just jam. So, like, I mean, this is as a general rule of thumb when you're trying to decide, like, what type of sizing do I want to be overbetting on the river? Just think about, like, how relevant is the river, right? Do I suggest you guys to be jamming like almost 5x here, 4.5x on the river? No, not against the population. I would still want to get calls. So I would probably go use like a 2x or something like that. But this is also true, guys, like in button versus big blind. So like keep that in mind if you're unsure about what type of sizing you want to use on the river. All right, getting to the flop three-way. We'll be talking about the situation where we face a cold caller in position and big blind also calls. If we are heads up, we have to check a lot. Being three-way should mean we have to check even more. So with more players in the pot, it means that the equity is split between even more players, so we have to be more careful. Also, the fact that we are in the pot out of position, facing multiple ranges, definitely is not the ideal situation. So does that mean, guys, that we should always be checking range in these situations? Okay, so to keep things simple, okay, if we are playing against two regulars, I would tend to just check my entire range. If we are playing against one regular and one recreational, then I would definitely not be checking my entire range always. And we're going to talk about like where we should try to deviate and all that. But keep in mind, if we are heads up, we need to be checking a lot. That means that if we are three-way, four-way, that type of stuff, we need to be checking even more. So we should not always be checking range. Always take a look at who is the cold caller and who is in the big blind. So having a look into the cold caller stats is super important and will dictate what type of strategy we should be using on the flop. Positions of each player are also super important. So let's take a look into a few situations, guys. So situation one, we are under the gun. We open. Button is a regular and he cold calls. Big blind recreational calls too. Board is 7-6 deuce. Is this a situation where we should be checking range? Okay, we got the first no here. Okay, so first of all, my first question to you guys, okay, is do you guys think that the button is incentivized to be betting very aggressively against you two players? So if no, and I agree with you guys that it's a spot where he's betting into a recreational, right? And he's betting into another player as well. Yes, he is in position, but he's playing into he's betting into two players, and he's also betting into a recreational. So that means that he's not just gonna stab ace three of club, for example, or something like that. So he's not incentivized to be reopening the action here quite wide. What does that mean for us now? yes, we do lose value versus the reg. So what happens? Is it worth betting the flop on the flop to potentially get button to fold and get heads up with fish? Yes, I mean, if we are value betting, that's what we want to do. You know, I wouldn't go crazy with bluffing. But the problem, like the thing is that once you bet here, right, as the under the gun opener, right, and you bet into a cold call on the button, a recreational on the big blind, do you, in the eyes of the regular, are you strong or not strong? Do you think that, like, in the eyes of the regular, that you have a strong range, like a medium, like medium strength hand, medium strength range, or like weak range, or whatever? Yeah. So he's gonna say, okay, you have a strong range, but the thing is that, like, yes, totally, I totally agree. So in his eyes, you're gonna have a strong range, but who are you going to make money against? Against the button player or against the big blind player? Big blind. So we don't, like, it doesn't matter, like, if the button, like, if the buttons say, oh, damn, like, he has a strong range now because he's betting into two players and he's like, there's also recreational in the big blind. That's totally fine, because this is not who you're going to make money against. You're going to be making money against the big blind player. So just having no betting range, you know, just having no betting range is just a big mistake, because the button is not incentivized to open really wide the action again. So we want to be value betting. So having a betting range here is very important, because we're effectively isolating the big blind. I mean, if we have like 7x, pocket 8s, pocket 9s, pocket 10s, like, we want to be betting this flop. Like, we don't want to be just checking, then button gets to check back, and then pretty much any turn card we don't like. Plus, we're facing two ranges, which is not great. All right. If we don't want to be, we already answered that. If we don't want to be checking range, should we bet our self-value region or a good spot to trap? We already mentioned that it should not be a good spot. Like, the thing is that, like we just said, it's not a good spot to trap because button is not incentivized to be opening the action. If you know that button is like a regular who's going to be stabbing wide and he's on the looser side, that type of stuff, I wouldn't mind checking a bit more. But it's not like we're going to have like a huge check raising range, just because like, I want to be betting myself, you know, the strong hands. But yes, we can still have a check raising range. What's c-bet size? I mean, it's really like, I mean, since we are facing a recreational, I wouldn't mind going like 75%. Usually I go like 1/3 pot, 1/3 pot out of position, but I would rather go small on a more locked down board. Here, the board is a bit more like drawvy and more connected and all that type of stuff. So I'm just going 75%, 60% is fine. All right, so let's take a look into situation 2. So under the gun opens, button is now a recreational and cold calls, and big blind is a regular who calls 2. The rec is playing 30-11. The board is 7-6 deuce flush draw. Is this a situation where we should be checking range? Yes, I like the adjustment, Peter. Yeah, so basically, like, once the recreational is on the button, once the recreational is on the button and the regular is in the big blind, what I would suggest is to always take a look into the stats of the button player. So now he's playing 30-11. That means he's really loose passive. That also means that he's not the type of guy who's just like bet, like stab big, over bet big turn, and just try to put a lot of money into the pot unless he has a very, very strong hand. So against this specific player, we cannot just say we're going to be checking range and then he's going to check back and then it just sucks, because I mean, we have plenty of hands that wants to be betting. Again, we're going to be a bit face up against the big blind, right? Because I mean, we're going to be betting into two people. That shows a lot of strength and all that type of stuff. But again, we're not going to be making money against him. We're mostly going to be making our money. We're going to be making money against the button. Yeah, that's why, like, when I wrote rec, I always wrote only rec, and the regular, I wrote the regular. So that way the rec and reg was like kind of like confusing. You jumped the gun a bit, John, but we'll talk about that in the next slide. So here, we should not be checking range just because, again, he's playing loose passive, so I still want to be having a betting range. So if we don't want to be checking range, should we bet ourselves? Value region or good spot to trap? I mean, we just answered that. Let me check. All right. Situation 3. Under the gun opens. Button recreational cold calls and big blind regular calls too. Now the rec is playing 48-38, so he's much more loose, aggressive. The board is 7-6 deuce, flush draw again. Is this a situation where we should be checking range? Yeah, so we can still have a betting range, but again, it's a spot where trapping is totally fine, because now the button recreational is much more aggressive. He's more likely to be reopening the action. Then we put the regular into a tough spot and we can just like check raise and then just do some back raising if the big blind calls, that type of stuff. So this is super important, right? Like this is like the first thing I try to take a look into, like who is the recreational that cold calls on the button, what is his stats, that type of stuff, to get an idea about how we should be approaching these type of situations. All right, we just answered that. All right, any questions about this, guys? All right, let's continue. So mistakes to avoid and what to look for. So easy approach would be to say, I just check my entire range always when facing a cold caller in position, but we would be missing some value, some very valuable value. I remember when I switched my strategy to like only to like when I understood like a few years ago that I should be like checking a lot versus cold callers in position. You know, I just switch from like 100% and just say, oh, I always check range, but it's definitely a clear mistake, because you need to be looking into like who you're facing and all that type of stuff, you know, because this will help you make better decision post flop. So I was definitely checking range way too much. That's what I just said. Every situation is different, so pay attention to positions, who is the cold caller, his stats, and all that. If you don't have any stats on the cold caller, I would try to fast play a bit too much, just because at low stakes, once people cold call, they generally tend to be a weaker player and a recreational player. So just fast playing without information is totally fine. So yeah. So when you bet into the multiple people, so this is also important, your range will look super strong to the reg. So if he starts to try to put a lot of money in the pot, we have to be careful, as this signals a lot of strength. So like once we bet into the let's say we check raise, you know. So let's say on the 7-6 deuce board, yeah, I mean, we just, like, I don't want to be doing this specific situation, but let's say that he just wants to be putting in money. He check raises us, or we check raise, he goes over the top. We have to be super careful because we signal a lot of strength, and he's basically saying, I still want to be putting all the money in. So we have to be really careful about that. So I select 2 hand history. They're not that super complex. So we're just going to take a quick look into them, and then we can wrap things up. So the first hand is Yuri, who sent me this hand. Basically, he opened from middle position. It's a 50 NL euro, so I'm not sure on which platform, but doesn't matter. So he opened pocket fives, cut off cold calls. So the first thing we see here is that the cutoff should not be cold calling here. So that signals that he's definitely a recreational. The board is ace, ace, 9, flush draw. We have a bit wider range. I mean, we're middle position 1, so I mean, it's so we're middle position. So it's not like we're going to be opening that much wider. But again, it's one of those board where the first thing I would say, the flush draw is not great. But the board is okay. So the board is high, high, low. So ace, ace, X. So I wouldn't mind just doing a C bet here to start to clean out some stuff from his range. We have like a spade, so we could potentially turn our hand into a bluff. But I don't mind the bet here. We do want to be checking as well. Just C betting range here, I think is not going to work. But this hand, I think it's a fine bet on the flop. So the turn goes, villain, we check, villain checks back. And then the river, we check, and villain bets 4 big blinds, and we call. So on the turn here, it's definitely a spot where we could do 2 things. We could check or bet. I wouldn't mind starting to turn this hand into a bluff. We put some 9x into a tough spot. We put some king x into a tough spot that I decided to call with on the flop, that we can just bet the turn and also potentially bet the river depending on the run out and all that. Plus we have a bit of equity if he has a hand like ace 10, for example. So we have some equity with the 4 to a flush there. So I wouldn't, like, this would not be the worst hand to actually turn into a bluff. I think the problem here is once we check here, first of all, like, the king turn really connects with his calling range. So we bet small. He's gonna having like 9x. He's gonna have hands like ace x. He's gonna have hands like king high. He's gonna have hands like flush draws on the flop as well. So this turn card actually hits him quite decent. So once we check and he checks back, I think the problem here is that, like, once we give up, I think we need to give up. Now here, once we bet, I think we might have to pull the trigger on the river. Just 1 second. What sizing would you use on the turn if we bet? I would use like a regular, like 2/3 sizing, something like that, where I can still value bet hands like ace 10, trip aces and all that. No, I think the river is definitely a mistake here. What do you guys think about the betting range here and also the call? So let's put Yuri on the spot here. The thing is that, like, here, for him to have a bluff, he would need to be that's what we do, Yuri. I mean, I'm super happy that you shared this with me. I mean, it's okay to make mistakes. The only thing we want to do is understand them and try to correct them, you know. But on the river here, like, for him to have a pure bluff, he needs to float hands like jack 10, queen jack, like even hands like king queen, king jack, king 10 actually like turned a pair and can definitely be betting like this. So it's really hard for him to have pure bluffs. It will need to be turning a hand like deuces through 4s into a bluff. which I mean could possibly happen, but he's gonna have much more value than he's definitely gonna be under bluffing. Also, his hand is repping like 10 value type of stuff. So should he be betting 10-9? No, I don't think so. Could definitely be betting a king. Just 1 second, somebody. What I wanted. So yeah, Andre says that gotta raise. I think it's a spot like in these spots where villain like this. Take this as a general rule of thumb. So let's say here he makes a smaller bet size like this, you know, like or 1/3 pot. Like it's really hard for him to be bluffing. He's basically saying, hey, I have a medium strength hand. So what happens is that even though you're getting a good price, you don't want to start bluff catching real light because he doesn't have many bluffs. And also, he doesn't have many bluffs, and his range contains a lot of medium strength hand. So basically what we have to do is we have to overfold our bluff catchers. And if we want to continue, we want to be attacking these type of bets and start raising. Would you ever really raise with this? I mean, we can still have hands like ace king. We can still have hands like that we can check raise. Yeah, we can still have sixes, true. I mean, we can still have, the thing is that like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have that much of a huge check raising range here on the river, but I wouldn't mind it, to be honest. I'm just scared that like, one of the things that also I kind of like is that the flush gets there on the turn. So one thing that might happen is that if he has a hand like ace five, he might be scared of the flush and just checks back trips, right? So just having a delay check raising range on the river, I think it's making some sense, just because like he's still gonna have some ace x, but I wouldn't really delay check raise if the turn was, let's say, the deuce of club, for example, because then I would expect him to be betting a bit more ace x. As I mean, his ace x is most likely the best end, and then that type of stuff. I wouldn't try to do it like crazy because I still think that people will call light against the raise here. Like I'm not even sure if he folds like a king, maybe potentially, but I think this would be fine, to be honest. Like sometimes like this, we just have to make sure we don't overdo it. But just calling here is a mistake. I would rather if Fury actually check raise here or fold it basically. So thanks for sharing the hand and putting you on the spot. Yes, totally, David. So Alex sent me this hand. So basically we opened the cutoff, big blind, not big blind, but button cold call. We are about 120 big blinds deep, 973 rainbow. From the cutoff, we're going to have a much wider range. So we're going to have like a 30% range. So that means that we might even have to do a bit more checking on those middling boards. It also depends on his calling range. I mean, it's really hard to know exactly because he might be three betting nines in these positions and sevens also. Whereas if he were in under the gun, he would mostly be calling them if he had a calling range. But again, like I think this hand, it's pretty simple. But I mean, you have to think like once you check here and let's say you check range, you have to be careful, right? Because you have quite a wide range. So once we start bluffing, let's say the flop goes check, check here, and we start bluffing. First of all, we don't have a club. Second of all, we don't block 10-9 suited, which is a hand that can potentially just check back the flop and cold call pre-flop as well. King nine suited might bet, might check, but we block that, which is okay. But I would rather have a club here. And also the thing is that like, we don't have like any equity, right? Like, so we have plenty of other stuff to be calling we're going to have hands like 5-6. We can have hands like 5-4. We can have hands like like a Jack 10, Queen Jack, even Queen Jack, like we have Queen High. So if we start bluffing like hands like this, I think we're going to be overdoing it. We're also going to have clubs, that type of stuff. So I think this hand should go into the checking range. If we start like betting this, I mean, we're going to be betting quite a bit too. So on the turn, he bets, and then on the river is a 4, and he goes for it. I think it's fine because like once we bet the turn, I think it's a bit on it's a bit on the looser side. We should be checking. We have better stuff to be bluffing, but on the river we kind of unblock some like clubs that he can have, which is great. And we also block King 9, which is fine. So like on the river, I think it's also a spot where you're going to be looking, you're going to get looked up quite often because you check the flop. So just under bluffing a bit is fine. And then, just betting pretty thin for value, because if you have a hand like Ace 7, King 7 suited, it's definitely a spot where you want to be betting turn, be betting river. As you see, like he gets called by 5s. I think it's a spot where, since we're going to be getting called a bit lighter, I think just shutting it down on the river might be making a bit more sense here. Also, just having the fact that we don't have club is fine. But again, we have much better stuff to be just to be bluffing. We're gonna have like Jack 10, Queen Jack, and then this end is not terrible because there's a lot of stuff that actually gets there. If we have a hand like 4-5, if we have a hand like 5-6, that gets there. If we bluff the hand like Ace 5, but again, or Ace 4, it's actually we hit a pair. So like I think that's a fine bet once the only thing is that I think on the turn we should it's not a terrible bet, but I would just check that a bit more, to be honest. But once I bet the turn, I think betting the river is fine, especially on that river. If the river is like the deuce, then we have more potential bluffs, and then I would pick my like lowest showdown value ones first, and then this one I would we can always win at showdown against a hand like Queen Jack a club or Queen 10 a club that he actually called the turn with. So why do you prefer to have a club? I guess that with the club we can bluff rivers, but if it's not, then yes, exactly. So this is why, like on the turn, I would rather have a club because on river clubs we can bluff. But here, not having a club is good. So this is why, like, it's good to be betting multiple type of hands on the turn, because if you only like bluff like high equity draws, like I don't know, like clubs here, then when the river club is there, I mean, you're like all your bluffing range gets there, so you need to have multiple bluffing hands in many spots so that on many different runouts you can actually have some bluffs. So like on the turn, I would rather have a club, and then on turn club river blank, we would bet turn mainly check river, but without having a club here, we would bet turn mainly bet the river here. If we were value betting turn, what sizing do we use? Mostly small and some 75%. Yeah, like we could use a couple of different strategies. We could use an overbet strategy. We could use a small bet strategy. It's one of these spots where it's kind of hard, where, I mean, you still have a hand. Like, the thing is that it's not like I want to be betting like 4s, So my threshold is probably going to be something like 7x or better. So betting like this sizing, I think, is fine. And then you could use like a overbet or something. I think again, like Equal called the button, right? So he's definitely recreational. So we can use multiple sizes, totally fine. I wouldn't even mind just blocking with a hand like 6s, something like that, just to like deny equity, that type of stuff. But just using multiple size, like in this position against a recreational, I think it's fine. There was one more thing I wanted to see here that I ran. Let me just check. Yeah, so it was this one where we ran multiple flop sizes. So against the check. Okay. So it uses the pot and the 75. It doesn't really use the overbet. So, I mean, it's anywhere from 75 to like pot size bet. So we just need to be betting big as the button cold call. So, all right, guys. So, I mean, Friday the 18th will be MMA Sure Dogs coaching webinar. It's going to be about playing multi-way pots. You're going to have some pre-flop considerations. You're going to have adjustment from late positions, adjustments from the blind, post-flop considerations. For myself, for next month, we're going to be taking a look at playing the small blind. So we're going to be taking a look at different situations where we're on the small blind. So it's going to be a mix of SRP, 3-bet pots, 4-bet pots, that type of stuff. It's going to be July. Oh, I forgot. It's the first week of July. So let me just check. So not the first, but it's going to be the 8th. So yeah, so it's going to be the 8th. So we're going to be doing a mix of single race pot, 3-bet pots, 4-bet pots. Going to talk about that. Other than that, I'm going to thank you guys for sticking with me. If you guys have any questions, just ask me right now. And I'm just going to wish you guys luck and see you next month.